Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Carlo, how do you make sure that you're making as much money as possible with your rentals?
I mean, there's a lot of different levers that you can pull to maximize, your profitability of your rentals, whether it's reducing expenses or staying up on market rents. But there's a lot of different facets we can get into, certainly, as it relates to increasing your rentals to maximize your profitability.
Carlo figured out that if he did things a little bit differently, he could make a lot more money from his rental property. So on the podcast today, we're going to talk about some of the ways that Carlo was able to cut expenses and raise revenue and make his rental properties more profitable. Joining us on the show today from Pittsburgh is Carlo Finnotti. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Carlo. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Are you thinking about investing in rental properties, but maybe you don't know where to start? My friends at MidSouth HomeBuyers make it simple. For over 23 years, they've been selling fully renovated turnkey rental properties in Memphis and Little Rock. We're talking new roofs, plumbing, electric, kitchens, bathrooms. Everything is brand new and done right. And here's the best part. Every property comes with a well-qualified tenant in place before you close. That means you get cash flow from day one. Plus, MidSouth continues to professionally manage the property for you after the sale, and they back it up with two powerful guarantees. You get a 1-year total maintenance warranty and a lifetime occupancy guarantee. Personally, I've bought 5 properties from them and I couldn't be happier. If you want to talk to someone that's been through the process, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you're ready to get started, just go to midsouthhomebuyers.com. That's midsouthhomebuyers.com. Carlo, let's start things off talking about your portfolio. Can you tell us what your rentals are like?
Sure. I mean, I'm in the Pittsburgh marketplace, so I have a variety of different rental properties, anything from single families up to a variety of multifamilies. And in my areas, it's C and in B plus areas. So that's kind of where I focus in the Pittsburgh metro.
And how long have you been investing for?
I don't know, eight or 9, maybe going on 10 years now.
Right. And when we had you on the podcast last time, you were working full time. Do you still have a day job today?
Oh yeah, still have a daytime job in information technology field. I've done that for 25 years as a leader in a variety of capacities in a high growth company. So we do a lot of investing on the side for real estate. So It's a lot of late nights and weekends for sure.
And you have a property manager, right?
Yep, we use a property manager. Operations.
How much involvement do you have in being involved with the property? Like, does your property manager really handle a lot of the day-to-day stuff, or are you still kind of involved?
If you have the right property manager, you really shouldn't be involved in the day-to-day, unless there's big things above a certain ticket item. We have a threshold of $500. If something's above that, leaks, in the roof or plumbing leaks or, something larger, I might get involved. And then when it goes into tenant turns, I'm definitely more involved in that process as a property manager. Typically is consumed with other tenant turns or replacing tenants.
Sure. All right. Well, let's talk about our topic today of how to make your rentals more profitable. And so it seems like there's really 2 ways to do this. You could either make more money or figure out how to cut costs. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
That's that. I mean, in any company, you can either make more revenue or cut expenses.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same thing for sure.
All right. So let's talk about the raising revenue and some ways to do that. And the most obvious way I can think of is staying up on what the market is doing. How do you watch the market rents to make sure that you're getting the maximum rent?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting process. I mean, in a lot of different cities and metros, even in Pittsburgh, rents can vary pretty drastically by 20 or 30%. So, I mean, you can look at Zillow, Rent-A-Meter, things of that nature. Folks will go out and Google. The property management company also keeps a pulse because a lot of the properties are near a lot of properties that they manage, so they know the market rents. But it also depends on, bedrooms, access to the units. If you have, say, a driveway or off-street parking, your rents can go up pretty significantly. If you have central air conditioning, or if you have a dishwasher or washer or dryer on site, that also can increase your rents. So it really depends on the layout demographics of the area that control that rent cost.
When you're looking to buy a new property, is that something you're looking at? Like having the off-street parking and having the washer and dryer, is that something that you look for when you're buying a property?
Yeah, I mean, just like most investors, you're going to model the property, you're going to look at the rents, you're going to look at the NOI and make sure the cap rate is right. Part of the rent cost is, does it have off-street parking or on-street parking? That's a big thing in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of houses built on hillsides, and you have to walk up a series of steps just to get to the house. Obviously, the rents are going to be much lower by hundreds of dollars because whether you're a homeowner or a renter, you're probably not going to want to walk up 15 steps just to get into the place.
Sure.
So it's definitely something you have to factor in into the rent analysis. And I also look at, are all the mechanics up to grade? Does it have central air conditioning? Does it have a dishwasher? Things of that nature.
Yeah. Now, as far as increasing rent, do you and your property manager decide, do you sit down ahead of time and say, okay, well, I think we can maybe go $25 more this year, or do you tell them raise the rent? How does the actual process work?
A good property manager, what they should be doing is sending you maybe a spreadsheet saying, hey, over the next 5 months, you have, these units coming due, right? And some people might be moving out, might be like, this is going empty. Or we're looking at just doing re-ups, to increase the rents. And they'll say, hey, they're below market by X dollars. We're going to increase this by $25. And some, and I've talked to a lot of other people, they have auto increases built in the lease of 5%. So it automatically just increases on the renewal. But for us, I might have bought a property, might have had tenants already inside, and it might be below market. So we're going to be doing larger, increases to kind of get them up to market. Right. But we try to forecast the best of our ability to say, here's the rents coming up. These units are already at market rent. There would be no increase. There is a point in perspective. If you have a great tenant, and they're somewhat below market, but they're a great tenant and they treat the place well and everything, you might want to just keep them at that current rent. Yeah. Because sometimes you increase rents, you might turn the unit because they're like, oh, I'm not going to pay another $50 more. I'm just going to go move out and go to another unit. So sometimes just keeping, because the turn costs of a tenant moving out and then having to paint or updating flooring and things of that nature might actually cost you more than that small incremental increase you're trying to do.
Totally. I mean, turnovers are my biggest expense. I don't know about you. Do you think turnovers are your biggest expense?
They absolutely are. I mean, it's very seldom you can just go in and just clean. You usually have to paint a hallway, patch some walls. And then if you're taking back security deposit because they were really rough with the unit, you might have to, replace kitchen cabinets, appliances. I mean, you have enough units, you come across all of it. Yeah. So yes, turnover expenses, vacancy and turnover, because you have to show the unit. So there could be a month of no rent. And then with a property manager, you also have to remember they take that first month's rent. So say they charge you anywhere between 7 and 10% for your property management. If you turn that unit and it's say it's $900 a month for that unit, they take that first month's rent. Right. Typically they do. Mine definitely does. So when you look at that percentage, and let's just use 8%. If it's 8% and you turn 10 units, it's not really 8% a month. It's really like 9.5 or 9% because you lost all that first month's rent because you turned the unit. You had to get you, and the reason they do that too, because I asked the property management company, I'm like, that's rough. Can we only do half the first month's rent? And they usually use realtors to show the unit, so they pay that almost that whole dollar amount to that realtor for showing the unit and getting a tenant in. So that's how they make money, the realtors. I mean,
it really adds up. I mean, it's like you said, with the fix-up cost, the vacancy, the commissions. I mean, it's anything you can do to avoid those costs, I think are worth it. And like in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to raise rent if you're going to risk losing a tenant.
100% agree. Unless you bought, say you bought a 2 or 3 unit, and they're so below market that you have to increase it up the market, which means they could move out, and then you're just going to have, and hopefully you already forecasted the CapEx to upgrade the unit. That's very common if you're taking over a new building and you're slowly doing upgrades. You're going to upgrade those rents. But if you have a portfolio that's established and you're fairly close to market rents, why smack the bee's nest to try to just get a few extra dollars, especially when they're great tenants that treat the place well, and it really doesn't need a ton of updates, and you don't want to have that turn and lose that first month's rent. So it's definitely, when you're operating any business, right, you're going to hopefully strategically look in the future and say, okay, it doesn't make sense to make these changes. And in some cases, it does make sense to make certain changes, but you're also hopefully forecasting your cash flow when you do that analysis.
I also like what you mentioned a few moments ago about automatically increasing the rent, that you write into the lease that the rent's going to go up 5% or 3% or whatever every year. Is that something you do or just something you've thought about doing?
We don't in our areas, but I did actually speak to the property manager recently, because it's like, if it's a well-established property, I'm okay putting, cost of inflation. The reason I said 5% because it has been. Now it is dropping down to that, that CPI value of 2 to 3%. I don't think people really go below 3% because, in the real estate world, inflation is a little bit more because you have all those different factors with insurance and CapEx and labor and things of that nature. So I think if you have a well-established portfolio, putting those auto increases in the lease is great. Then you just have to make sure, if you're using like a system like Appfolio or Buildium or whatever your property management system is, that if you put that in, I believe those softwares will automatically do that and send out a lease, and you just modify the lease agreement. It's already in it. The increase just goes in. So I don't have that in. We basically look at what's coming due, because a lot of my places are, were rehabs or not at market. But I'm starting to get to the point where we can automate some of that. The more you can automate, the less cycles of your own time it takes to make it a more feasible business.
All right, let's talk about some of the expenses that we can try to cut. The first one that comes to mind is one of the biggest ones, insurance. Is that something that you'll shop around every once in a while?
In the previous years, I did not, because I had a really good broker in the area, and insurance wasn't really moving, and it was good for several years. Then, between, I guess, a lot of the storms that either hit the Northeast up here, whether it's hail, wind damage, microbursts, you had the hurricanes that hit down in Florida, and then obviously wildfires in California. I talked to the insurance company, and they said reinsurance rates are going up everywhere. So it's not just for your own portfolio. You'll see your own home has gone up, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just going and negotiating heavily. And I probably reached out to 15 different insurance companies. Rental real estate, the reinsurance on rental real estate went up because of, just the claims that were happening. Labor was more expensive. Materials has been more expensive. We've had a pretty hyperinflated environment since 2019 to 2020 when COVID occurred. So things have got more expensive. So you'll always shop your rates. It's no different than if you're going to put a roof on your house or on your property. You're going to shop it out to 3 or 4 people and see what your best price is and who has the best reviews, things of that nature. Insurance, you want to shop it. So if you shop your rates, what I got into, it's, if you raise your deductible, that starts to, control. They're like, if you keep the same deductible, it's going to cost, maybe 30% more. But if you increase your deductible, it'll only be a 15% increase. I'm just giving rough numbers, just for back of napkin math. But if you're raising your deductible, basically insurance companies hedging their risk because they're saying, okay, more out of pocket is coming from the investor if there is ever a claim to happen.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to lower your bills. The one thing I would caution everybody is just make sure you have that cash set aside. If your deductible is going to be $5,000, make sure you have that $5,000 set aside in case all of a sudden you have a big claim and you've got to cover that. So I guess you're making sure that you're not like filing small claims or doing things that are going to increase your premium every month or every year.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some storms come through Pittsburgh, and the biggest thing for us is always the older plumbing or, the freezing cycles we have in January. We go negative degrees, pipes freeze. In my case, I had an instance where I did have damage inside of a property. A pipe burst, and it was a 2-unit. None of the tenants were there. It was near Christmas time. It was happened a couple of years ago. So water was pouring inside, but no one knew until days later. But I looked at the deductible and the cost of me getting contractors in to renovate the portion of the building that was damaged. It just didn't make sense to make the claim, right? So, and that's that's why the insurance companies want to raise your deductible. So, it doesn't make sense to make the claim.
Right.
And if you get claims against yourself on your own home or inside of a car accident or inside of a real estate portfolio, it still goes against you. I think it's a little bit different in the commercial insurance, but they still do look at like probably the amount of claims that were put against that LLC or whatever you have the property. So.
Yeah, it's definitely something to shop at least every couple of years, because I actually just shopped my insurance a few months ago. I had a pretty big increase, and I called my agent and asked if there's anything he could do to bring it down. And he's like, no, there's inflation. It's just the cost of everything's going up. So I called a few other agents and ended up saving $2,000 a year. So it's definitely something you want to keep an eye on. Another challenge we have today is property taxes are going up. Are you seeing that a lot in your portfolio, that you're paying more in property taxes?
Yeah, I mean that's the unfortunate drawback in Pittsburgh. It's a pretty affordable city to live in. So compared to plenty of other states, the problem here is we have 3 different types of taxes. If you're not in the city of Pittsburgh, there's a lot of suburbs on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. So you pay a county tax, which just increased. And then you have your local borough tax of that suburb that you live in. And then you have the school tax, which that school tax could be in several suburbs or several, we call them boroughs here in Pittsburgh. So there's 3 tax bills that you have to pay every year, school tax being the largest one. So the taxes are definitely on the rise. And then they have assessments. So you have to fight the taxes and go through reassessment battles and it's I can understand both ends of the spectrum as it relates to tax. There's always a debate about any taxes, right? So I understand why the taxes are used, but from an investor perspective, when you do a model and your insurance goes up and your taxes go up, but your rents aren't going up accordingly to the percentage of the other things increasing, it obviously starts to hurt profitability.
Right.
So the only thing you can do here in Pittsburgh is go through a reassessment, to reassessment hearings in hopes to lower your reassessment value, and then you can control your tax basis. But it's definitely been another thing. Can't go shop taxes. I wish you could.
Right. Yeah, it's not easy, but I know of people that have appealed the taxes and have gotten it reduced. So it's definitely something to look at, especially if you have a big increase.
Right.
The other thing that's going up is just with inflation, wages and repairs are more expensive. Have you seen a lot of that things are just costing more?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of turns and just a lot of rehabs over the years. Just talking to contractors. I always work when I do bids. I try to look at price per hour. Like it's going to be 3 weeks worth of work. I want to pay X per hour, and a lot of contractors like, listen, I have to increase my hourly rate because their insurance went up, right, and their labor went up because they have to pay people more. So they're increasing their rates and passing it through. Materials for sure has gone up. It started to regulate a little bit. If you looked at COVID, which was crazy, what happened to lumber, lumber prices have, regulated, but it's still pretty expensive for materials. I mean, it's from, when I started almost 10 years ago compared to now, like you would get some kitchen cabinets and you get some flooring or some appliances and that, it'd be X dollars. Now you're doing it. You're like, wow, it is so much more. If you want to do a full turn, right? You want to take out the kitchen and bath and put flooring in, the costs are, exponentially higher. And there's nothing you can really do about that other than, if you want to get frugal, you can buy used appliances. I do that. I mean, you can find a lot of good used appliances on Facebook Marketplace. There's resellers of used appliances. There's scratch and dent appliance places in Pittsburgh that I bought, really nice appliances, like stainless steel appliances. They look brand new, but they have a scratch on the side. But when you put it back between the cabinets, you don't see the scratch anymore. So there's certain ways kind of shop to find discounts. Home Depot, if you do enough volume with Home Depot, you do get 1% off, and then they give you like awards that you can use to kind of like lower your dollar amount. You can also use credit cards with points. If you're using credit cards with points and you're getting money off, maybe you're just getting 1% off. At the end of the year, it's giving you kind of a rebate towards all the materials that you bought, and then Home Depot is giving you 1% off. That's also a way to kind of save on some of the materials that you might be buying for the units. Yeah,
I think one thing that can get people in trouble is shopping for the cheapest contractor. Like you want to pay a fair price, but if you look for the cheapest contractor, I feel like that might be asking for trouble.
Yeah, I mean, you always hear, and you'll see it in our area. We have a couple Facebook pages of like, you get what you pay for, right? There is some really reasonable contractors out there that do very good work, and then there's the contractors that are really past what an investor would use. They're getting more expensive because they have a crew. And they're doing a lot of marketing. They have a bunch of vehicles. They have to charge a lot more, and then they're pretty much going into homes and doing kitchens and baths and maybe additions. Those type of contractors are typically not the contractors you're going to use for the investment community. Investment communities usually they got 1 or 2 trucks, a little beaten up. They have 2 or 3 people, and they're reasonable, and they still make money and they're still doing good work. But if you go with the really really cheap person, you'll get burned. And to be honest, if you're in real estate long enough, you'll be burned a couple times. It's I would always say, put a contract in place, even if it's a single piece of paper. Don't pay a lot of money up front, or I actually don't pay any money up front. I might buy materials to put materials on site, and then you can do weekly distributions as the work's being done. If you pay up front, sometimes that person can walk and then your money's gone.
Yeah, and that's a good idea to buy the material and have them do the work, because if they buy the material, they're probably going to mark it up. So that's a good way to save money. Yeah.
Well, if you buy a material, you know exactly what the material costs are. So, and then when you negotiate with the contractor, just give me a labor number to do, the following scope. I want to put flooring in, kitchen, bath, or maybe I just want to paint it out and put a kitchen in. And then you buy the materials, you can do it over a credit card. They could call you while at Home Depot, whatever, you do a credit card purchase. Now you can do text to confirm with Home Depot, where it will just text you and have the dollar amount. And if you have a Home Depot account, you can log in online and see all your purchases. And then, the materials are going there. Hopefully they're not buying extra materials. You'll see things like they bought Red Bull. That's always part of I got a Red Bull budget every year. But so it helps you negotiate the cost, because then you know exactly what the labor number is compared to the materials.
If you want to hear more from Carlo, he was on the podcast a couple of years ago on episode number 357. And if you want to reach out to Carlo, I've got his contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 529. I'd like to thank Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, definitely reach out to Chaley. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you. Her website is ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit that follow button. That way you'll be notified every single Tuesday when I put out a new episode. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.